Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today with the mid-year freak-out book tag. I'm assuming we're freaking out because it is the middle of the year all of a sudden, and how did that happen? But I loved this set of questions about what I've read so far this year. I was not tagged anyone, and unfortunately, I can't tell you where the original tag came from. I tried searching for that in YouTube and I couldn't find it. But I can tell you, I've seen this all over booktube, and most recently by Nikki at Red Dot Reads, one of my favorite channels, so please go check that out. So this tag has 13 questions. I'm going to try to go through them pretty quickly. So question 1 is the best book you've read so far in 2023. Well, this also happens to be the first book I read in 2023, or rather listened to on audio, and that is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. When I listened to it on audio, and the audio is outstanding, I thought to myself, this is going to be probably my #1 book of the year. And so far, it still is. I just loved this book. I love Charles Dickens. This is sort of parallels David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And I also love Barbara Kingsolver. And this, I have to say, is one of her absolute best. I often say that her earliest novels are her best. The Poisonwood Bible, The Bean Trees and Pigs in Heaven. But with Demon Copperhead, she brought it. It is outstanding, perhaps her best ever. And as I said, the audio is amazing. If you haven't read this yet, highly recommend you do. And check out the audio. The narrator is incredible. It is a very long book. It took me a full month to listen to it. But when it ended, I was sorry that it was ending. And I missed the characters. That's how good it is. So that was definitely my best book so far, although I have had quite a number of 5-star reads. Question 2, the best sequel you've read so far in 2023. I don't read a whole lot of series, and this is my favorite, so this is an easy one. Voyager by Diana Gabaldon. I recently found out that's how she says her name. I've been saying it wrong all along. I only just recently finished this for Big Book Summer. It is a very big book. The reason my bookmark is still in it is because I got to the end of this 870-page monster and hated for it to end, and immediately started reading the excerpt from the next book in the series at the end. So as I said, I don't read a lot of series. I can't wait to read book 4. This was book 3. Voyager, and I think Voyager was my favorite of the first 3 so far. Question number 3, the best new release you haven't read yet, but want to. I don't often read books close to their release date. I tend to be a little behind the times, but there are 2 books I've recently heard about, recent releases that I would definitely like to read. One is, of course, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, because everybody's talking about it, and everybody is saying it's amazing. So I definitely want to read that one. The other one I just heard about on a podcast the other day, The Road to Roswell by Connie Willis. So this sounds like a bit of a departure for Connie Willis. She's one of my favorite authors for her time travel novels. Books like Doomsday Book, which takes place in the 1300s, with modern travelers going back to the 1300s. And her amazing 2-book series, All Clear and Blackout. These are also time travel. They're all part of the Oxford time travel series that she has. though you don't need to read them in order except for these two. And these are set in England during World War II. Absolutely stunningly engrossing books. Gripping, suspenseful, twisty. They've got a sense of humor. Connie Willis is just an amazing writer. And I've loved her time travel books. This new book that's coming out, or that just came out, The Road to Roswell, is not time travel. In fact, it sounds a little bit on the silly side. It's about a woman traveling to Roswell for a conference, and her Uber at the airport is driven by an alien. An alien who looks like a tumbleweed, apparently. And so it's kind of an alien road trip book. They pick up other people along the way. Normally I would think, I'm not sure that's for me. But it's Connie Willis, so I definitely want to read that. Question 4, my most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I have to admit, I don't have an answer for this one. And I tried to do a little digging online. There is a new Stephen King book coming out. That might be good, but I don't even know what it's about yet. I just don't pay that much attention to what's coming. And question 5, my biggest disappointment so far this year. I went through my reading journal. I couldn't really find any books that disappointed me. There were some that I might have given 3 stars to, actually only 1 or 2. But that wasn't necessarily a disappointment. I didn't necessarily have high expectations for those. I tend to choose my books pretty carefully. I know what I like. I do try to read broadly, and particularly my book groups help me do that. But I don't read a lot of books that are disappointments. I almost never have a 2-star book or 1 star, because if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to finish it. I just choose my books carefully. So no disappointments so far this year. My biggest surprise, I had trouble with this one, but I chose Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. The surprise was, obviously, this is a classic. A lot of people have said it's an amazing book. I was expecting it to be very good. The surprise to me was that it was really good. Of course, the writing is excellent, beautiful writing. But she's very clever. There's a wonderful sense of humor in this book. And it's, sometimes classics are good, but they take a long time to read because they're slower paced. Not the case with this one. And that was what surprised me. It's fast paced. It's a gripping story. I expected to like Their Eyes Were Watching God, but I expected it to be hard to read. And the wonderful surprise was that it was easy to read and really, really enjoyable. Question 7, my favorite new author this year, new to me. And I had quite a few to choose from, but I was trying to choose different books for each prompt. So I chose Annie Hartnett, the author of Unlikely Animals. This was a Booktopia book. If you watch my channel, you know that every year I go to a weekend event in Vermont called Booktopia. Annie was one of the wonderful authors there that I really enjoyed meeting and talking to. And this book surprised me just because I really, really loved it. It's a suspenseful story. It's about family. It's about a community, but it's also got a really great sense of humor. There are some dark themes here, addiction, chronic illness, and death, but it's got a great sense of humor, which I love in a book. So I definitely want to read more from Annie Hartnett. Question number 8. My newest fictional crush? Well, I didn't really have a new one, so I went with a repeat fictional crush. Of course, probably anyone who's read the Outlander books will agree that Jamie is an excellent fictional crush, kind of the perfect man. And this book just shows him at his worst and at his best. So Jamie from the Outlander series is my fictional crush. Question 9, my newest favorite fictional character. I had to go with another favorite book from January, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I had heard great things about this book, of course. And sometimes my worry was that all of the hype around it was going to ruin it for me, that it wouldn't live up to my expectations. Well, it exceeded my expectations. I loved this book. It surprised me in that it had far more emotional depth than I expected it to. It deals with some difficult topics, but it has such a fabulous sense of humor. And much of that comes from the main character, Elizabeth Zott, even when she's not trying to be funny necessarily. But I loved her as a character. I loved her as a mother, as a woman with horrible discrimination and worse in the 1950s and 60s, as a female scientist, which I could relate to. Yeah, Elizabeth Zott's my new favorite fictional character. And there's a new TV series coming out on Apple TV, I think in the fall. It's coming up soon, so I can't wait to see Elizabeth brought to life on the screen. Question 10, a book that made me cry. There were several choices here. I have teared up quite a few times this year, but the one I chose is The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. This is an audiobook that I just recently listened to in June for Big Book Summer. Oh, and it's a heartbreaking novel. It is also moving and even funny at points. If a book can make me both laugh out loud and cry, that's a winner. And this was one of those. Question 11, a book that made me happy. Well, many of these books I've talked about that made me laugh certainly made me happy, but they all tended to also deal with darker themes. A book that just made me happy without any of the darker stuff was Parnassus on Wheels by Christopher Morley. This is a classic book that I read for a read-along with the Book Cougars podcast. If you haven't checked out the Book Cougars, please do. They're two friends of mine from Booktopia that have been doing this podcast, I don't know, about 5 years now. It's wonderful. And they've got a great friendship, which really comes through in their podcast. And they chose this as their first pick for their read-along this year is focused on books about books. And it is just a wonderful, uplifting story about a woman in the early 1900s who decides to buy basically one of the world's first bookmobiles. It's a wagon pulled by a horse. The man she buys it from is quite a character. And this is a woman who, given the time, has spent her life caring for men, mainly her brother. And she just decides one day to leave and go on the road with this bookmobile. It is a book full of joy and happiness, humor. Really enjoyed that. Question 12, the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. So here's the thing, and BookTube, don't hate on me. I don't buy a lot of books for myself. I decided years ago when money was tight to stop buying books for myself. If I need a new book, like for a book group, I get it from the library. I get most of my audios from the publishers. Occasionally I get an ARC from a publisher as well. And I get plenty of new books though, because my husband and I, and my sons, we give each other books as gifts. But anyway, I was only counting the ones that I've bought for myself this year, which is a very small number. I did buy a few books for myself for Booktopia, in the interest of supporting Northshire Bookstore that hosts the event every year. So the book I chose as the most beautiful book is kind of an odd choice. I chose this cover. It is not beautiful in the sense of, oh, how pretty, but I thought it was a really striking cover that really captures the tone and the sense of this book. A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates is a psychological thriller about a teenage nephew who moves in with a family, and the nephew may or may not be a psychopath. And I just thought the cover really captures the dark tension that defines this book. So I chose it not for its beauty per se, but it's a beautiful cover in that it perfectly captures the book. And finally, question 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I don't need to read any books by the end of the year, but there are a lot of books I want to read. I like to read seasonally, as you might have noticed. So I've got plans for the rest of Big Book Summer. I've got plans in the fall. I like to do a challenge from the book blogging world, the RIP challenge. That's Readers Imbibing Peril, to read kind of darker stuff during the fall. I've got loads to choose from on my shelves for that. Mysteries, thrillers, dystopian, things like that. I'm looking forward to Nonfiction November. I've got a bunch of books set aside for that. So I will just focus on the immediate future. I'm not going to get to all of the books in my Big Book Summer stack. I never do. I always choose plenty just so I can choose during the year. But here are a few that I do hope to finish by the end of Big Book Summer. Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Heard great things about this book, and I really want to read it. I'll be doing a read-along of The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles with Nikki of Red Dot Reads in August. I can't wait to do that. Let me know if you want to join us. And usually, because Big Book Summer, that's a challenge that I host, runs until the first week of September, it overlaps with the RIP challenge. So usually at the end of the summer, the book I choose to finish up Big Book Summer also counts for the RIP challenge. So this year, that's going to be Burn by Nevada Barr. I love her thrillers. This is from her Anna Pigeon series, about a national park ranger. And this one is set in New Orleans, where we used to live. So I've been really looking forward to that. So those are 3 books that I look forward to finishing for Big Book Summer, and all kinds of other books I look forward to the rest of the year. There are always so many books I want to read. So that's it for me for the mid-year freak out book tag. I don't think I'm freaking out too much. Let me know where you are in your mid-year reading. What have been your favorite books so far this year? And what do you plan to read in the second half of the year? Let me know in the comments down below.